Now, I just want to clarify, and this is something that the IEC has clarified, that the issue is not with the party that nominated the former president. It is with the former president, Mr. Jacob Zuma. So it does not mean that the MK party is disqualified.
President Jacob Zuma will not be allowed to stand for election on May 29th. The Independent Electoral Commission has decided. Thanks for watching the Bongwani Menzi YouTube channel. Please like, share and subscribe. He has a criminal record with a sentence exceeding 15 months. Objections were lodged against 8 candidates by different political parties. 7 were refused, with the objection to Zuma the only one upheld, said the IEC chairperson. Let's look at a group of people debating this matter.
Thank you so much for joining us. Also, our digital audience here as well. I mentioned at the top from the various higher learning institutions that they're from. Please raise your hands if you have any questions for our guests. We'll get straight to you in a short while. All right, Mr. Kolu, maybe to you first, and let's get a legal basis or legal understanding of what we're talking about here. In terms of the commission, when they consider objections, they're looking at Section 30 of the Electoral Act, right? But they also read it with 2 areas of the Constitution, namely Section 47 and 106 of the Constitution. Talk to us about these constitutional provisions. Help us understand it.
Firstly, good evening to you, Lane, and good evening to the fellow guests and to the viewers at home. Thank you for having me. Firstly, I will focus on Section 47, which states that if it happens that you need to qualify, you need to be eligible to be part of the National Assembly, there are certain instances where you don't qualify. So the main one that I'll talk about, I'll just go straight to Section 47, subsection 1, paragraph E, that says if you have, as you've stated before, if you have a sentence of 12 months or more, you are not eligible to be part of the National Assembly, right, which is what is happening with the former president. He has a sentence from, if you remember, from June 2021, where he was given a sentence of 15 months. So what happens now is that if he's in that situation, he's not eligible to be part of the National Assembly, same as Section 106, subsection 1, paragraph E, which is part of the section that talks about being part of the provincial legislature.
Right.
Now, what I found interesting is the fact that obviously the MK might have anticipated that this might happen, but the question is what can they do about it? Because if you had the interview that was done by the commissioner, she stated very clearly that in any case, before anything happens, the person who's part of the list to be candidate, in terms of Section 27, subsection 2, paragraph C, you must sign on the candidate as a substance form, right, that says that you qualify. So you qualify in terms of the Constitution. So that is the challenge that I think the president has.
Right. So part of being a candidate is signing that acceptance form, and that form confirms that you're eligible to be a member of parliament, right?
Yes, in terms of Section 47 and 106.
Right. Before we look at the politics of this whole thing, so we understand now from reporting from Natasha Piri that there is possibly going to be an appeal. Prospects, sir, when you look at this, good or bad in terms of success?
Well, if I look at it objectively in terms of the law, I don't see how they'll succeed. The only way they have is a technical approach, Blaine, where they've been consistently saying, I've just tried to read articles that I could find, but they've been consistently saying as MK that they will do whatever they can, even if it means changing the Constitution. Now, for you to change the Constitution as a party, you must have a 2/3 majority, and in terms of Section 74, subsection 1 and to 3 of the Constitution. So that is what they need to do.
And that's a really high bar.
It's a high mark, but I'm not a numbers person, and I'm just focusing on the law.
Jolene Kotza, if it is clear in terms of the law about the conviction, etc., and the sentence, then why continue? Why does the MK party continue with Mr. Zuma on the parliamentary list? Is it a case of they did not know, or is there another strategy at play here?
I think that is it's a very interesting question, and I think it really brings us to the point where we do need to start looking at what are some of the political and democratic values that would drive our political elites. Bearing in mind, the Constitution provides us with a certain institutional framework. That institutional framework gives us the rules by which the various actors need to engage in their political game, if one will. If there is, as was noted earlier, kind of saying, no, but we need to change the rules of the game because this is the person we want to get into Parliament, my question then becomes around the respect for institutional integrity and the respect for those constitutional rules that have to guide the behavior of political elites within those institutions. And I think it's also quite crucial to bear in mind this is our first general election that we would have after a very difficult period with COVID, after some very difficult questions that have come up on institutional integrity, most notably through the findings of the Zondo Commission. So I think from a political level, for me, those questions around institutional integrity are going to become quite important.
Prof. Mgomezulu, same question to you. If the law is clear, why continue with Mr. Zuma on the list?
Blaine, thank you very much for the question. You know, there is more to this than it meets the eye. I totally agree with Mr. Kodo that in terms of law, it seems pretty clear. But as I said, there is more to it than it meets the eye. Ask yourself the very first question, how did the Constitutional Court arrive to the 15 months? That's where things started going wrong. In fact, things started going wrong with Zondo himself, because Zondo is the one person who created us these problems in many ways. One, when the former president appeared before him, he was not treated like any other. I remember having a series of interviews on this one. One of the callers said, no, Patrick Mgomezulu is wrong because Zuma cannot be treated like all other witnesses because he has been charged. I said, no one has been charged. If you appear before the commission, Mr. Kulu would confirm this. There is a difference between a commission of inquiry and a court of law. A commission of inquiry is there to just get facts. So that's where things went wrong. Then, as if that was not enough, when the issue went straight to the Constitutional Court, the Constitutional Court did not apply its mind. It just took this case as presented by Zondo, who was part of the Constitutional Court anyway, would have expected the outcome. Then, of course, there was no trial that ever took place there. And then the judgment that was delivered by Sisi Kambembe was riddled with emotions. So in other words, part of it was based in law, but the bulk of it was based on emotions. I remember having interviews with some of your colleagues, Blaine, saying that if you are a judge, more especially the Constitutional Court, we have to apply the law to the letter, simply because that is the apex court of the land. Whatever mistake you make at that level will come back to haunt us. So in this case, we cannot blame the IEC, but the blame should go back to the Zondo Commission and should go back to Sisi Kambembe and his company, those who delivered the judgment, which, as I said, was riddled with emotions. And then you had an option whether to give him a suspended sentence or find him guilty in absentia like they did, but then you give him an option of a fine, we wouldn't be here. But he went straight for 15 months. When Zondo himself had suggested 2 years. Where did he get it from? I don't know, maybe there are different schools of law. Mr. Kulu can assist me here.
Right.
Here are lawyers who are supposed to know the law, but they seem to be found wanting at that point, and that is why we're here.
So given that we are here, what do you think is the end game in terms of the state of play?
No, the MK, like any other political party and like any other individual, we have to exhaust all options available. In this case, they are allowed to appeal this decision by the 2nd of April, which is on Tuesday. And then, of course, the Electoral Court will make a pronouncement by the 9th of April. Right. So they are basically exhausting the law, as should be the case, as anyone else is entitled to. So there is nothing wrong with them doing that. And then let the Electoral Court make the final determination.
Right. Mr. Kulu, is there anything in law that prevents the MK party from using Mr. Zuma's image on posters, etc., in terms of their campaigns?
I think in terms of the posters and so forth, it won't be a problem. The only issue will be obviously on the ballot paper. I'm not too sure about that, because we have a similar situation with the IFP. If you followed it even before Ubaba Masuti passed away, Ushenge, they were actually using him on their T-shirts and also on the poster. So it might be the same thing, where we see him playing a role outside of obviously leading in the parliament and also in the provincial legislature, as we are dealing with it now. Right. But also, I think what Udlagadlaga has stated, as much as we see that there's no other way, but it's very serious to note that we have not been here if the law was applied correctly, because if you go to Section 35, subsection 3, paragraph D and E, it says you have a right to be present during your trial. So in this case, Msholozi was not present, but we are here now, and we can't go back, but it's just a question mark and a big elephant in the room. But in any case, we will hear from the MK party what they will do about all the scenarios that we are discussing today.
Jolene Steenkotze, just to button up the point, how important is Jacob Zuma's continued visible association with the MK party for the party's success in this election?
I think we have to bear in mind that we find different representatives that represent different sections of the population, correct?
Right.
And different political faces that are associated with different political parties. So just purely from, I think, that politicking perspective, the figure of Jacob Zuma is extremely important to the MK party. Also, if we bear in mind Jacob Zuma's personal history, his personal involvement, kind of his growth through the MK as well. So it really speaks to a face giving voice possibly to people who feel that they have been marginalized throughout kind of the conduct of politics or throughout elections. So from that perspective, I would say the figure of Jacob Zuma is extremely important.
All right. Professor Mgomezulu, before I go to digital audience, your take on that?
Absolutely. Whether one likes it or not, like the president would say, will win the elections whether they like it or not. So on this one, whether you like it or not, former President Zuma is a force to be reckoned with. One is a charismatic leader, two is closer to the people, and three, he understands some cultural practices which then endears him to the majority of South Africans. I've heard people advancing the view that former President Zuma is only popular in KZN, which is absolutely wrong. You might have seen that when MK goes to other provinces, you find a similar excitement about the MK party. And then, of course, people will dismiss that and say, no, but the numbers are not that great. I'm not a fan of numbers like Mr. Kolo. Kabasha is arguing from a legal perspective, but I'm not one person who is excited about numbers. As I said, with the people feeling Mapita Stadium, I say, no, we can't just count on that and say we've got the votes, because those people still have to vote, and you don't know how they're going to vote. Right. So, but the short answer is that former President Zuma is indeed a force to be reckoned with, which is the reason why of all the new political parties, the MK party is the one that is getting so much airtime, to the extent that even the governing party ends up unwittingly canvassing for MK at the expense of their own party, and then scoring own goals in the process. So in other words, the emergence of MK with former President Zuma at the face has in fact left people mesmerized. Some don't even know what to say, and they're scoring more goals.
To Professor Mngomezulu, with regards to how do you think the supporters of the former president, as well as the MK party, should be processing or are processing the news that there's this objection and that objection was sustained by the IEC?
No, thank you very much for the question. I think Howard is posing a very critical question, and I like his statement that when our court passed this judgment, it was harsh, but then it also said it was necessary in order to make sure that we balance things, because of course we cannot just let things go. But the manner in which everything was handled was totally wrong. So what the MK then is doing right now is trying to reflect on that. Of course, it's too late now. Had they joined me at that time, because I'm one of the people, in fact, who stood by my statement at the time that Zondo was wrong, the ICJ was wrong, and there are a number of people who brought us here. So then right now the MK is faced with very few options. The only option they have right now is to go to the electoral court and then try to argue their case there. But they cannot use the old decision that was taken, the wrong decision that was taken, and then bring it here. So as to how they will maneuver this, we can just wait for the legal team as to how they craft their argument in court, and then with the understanding that they are going to be listened to. But the reality is that on the issue of violence, we cannot rule that one out. And in fact, I've done a couple of interviews where I raised concerns when this issue first emerged, that some people were saying that if MK does not participate in the election, there will be no election to start off with. And if former President Zuma is not allowed to be the president of the party, there will be no election. Of course, that was a concerning statement. But what concerned me even more was when the president immediately talked about this in the media, to the extent of saying that the soldiers are ready. You don't do that. If you are the president of the country, study the situation objectively, and whenever you make a statement, you make a firm statement. You don't respond to issues as they come, because there is a spokesperson who can do that, Mr. Vincent Magwenya. So I would say that we cannot rule out the possibility of violence. But my fear is that with statements saying that bring the soldiers to deal with the situation, then of course you might see more blood than we saw in 2021. So this is a cause for concern. And as to who will be to blame for this, you be the guest.
Let's I won't throw that to you, Mr. Kulu, but pick up on the question that Howard had regarding the 15-month, the 15-month sentence as a defense.
At this point, as Lara has said, it's way too late. If maybe in 2021 the sentence was appealed, then section 46, subsection 1, paragraph E would apply, because if you read into that section, it says that disqualification does not apply if at the time when the sentence has been handed out, we are appealing, or the process to appeal has not expired. Now it's almost 3 years later. So I think the 15 months defense will probably not apply as at this moment. Like I said in the beginning, what MK has been raising more, especially in the media, but we don't know what the legal strategy will be beyond that, is that they will fight for a 2/3 majority. But in terms of the 15-month sentence, as Lara said, it's too late for that, unless there's some other strategy that the lawyers will have.
Jolene Kotze, before I go to Letitia, I just need to get your take on this with regards to the potential of violence in the lead up to the elections. How should that be processed? How should we be thinking about that?
I think, with my research focus very much on questions around democracy, citizenship, belonging, and all of those interesting questions that drives politics. The question of political violence and political instability, I think we are at a particularly sensitive time in our democratic history. That would be my first point. But I just want to extend this argument a bit further and just say, we also need to bear in mind how the political narrative is going to be received by the broader electorate. We are already in a situation where people, ordinary citizens, are increasingly disillusioned with politics, increasingly disillusioned with their political representatives. Levels of political trust is at an all-time low, both in politicians as well as institutions. And I do feel that there is a responsibility on all actors, on political parties, to really try and navigate those threats of violence, and, saying that there won't be an election vis-a-vis the soldiers already, that very strong narrative in the public imagination, because ultimately, as we saw in 2021, people voted, but they voted with their feet by staying away from the polls. So we also need to bear in mind that we do want broad political participation in this election, and do need to pay attention to our political narratives.
Right. I mean, apathy is something that we don't want as well. That's why a show like today's show, in helping us understand in terms of the process of the electoral system and the consequences of such decisions, is very important. I need to take a quick break. When we come back, straight to digital audience. Stay with us. Welcome back. Time is of the essence. You're watching It's Topical. We're understanding the process with regards to the objections and what sort of decisions were made and the implications thereof. So it's important. Let's go to our digital audience straight up. Hands up all round. Letitia, I promised to get to you first. Go to you.
Thank you, Blaine, and good evening, everyone. So this is a very unfortunate situation, given that Jacob Zuma was the former president of the country and he fought for the freedom of the country. So his contributions are well noted, but it's also important to state that a crime has been committed, and unfortunately there's consequences for all of our actions. As you stated earlier, Section 47 clearly states that if you've been convicted of a crime, and you've been sentenced to 12 months or more, then you can't be a member of parliament. But I think, as the professor has stated earlier, there's more to it. I think the intention would be to ruffle some feathers. The intention would be to incite violence to a certain extent, to make people uncomfortable. So I think there's more to this. But I believe that the IEC has made a good decision, because the law has to abide, justice has to prevail, and unfortunately that's what's on the ground. And I think it's also going to teach a lot of people to abide by the law. So those are my thoughts. I think good decision by the IEC, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's hear from Mosabetsi. If you can unmute. All right. Are you battling? There we go. Go on.
No, I'm okay. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to the guests and the contributions and the insights that they have already shared. I have a couple of questions, and the first question that I have is, perhaps from a legal perspective, on what grounds could former President Jacob Zuma and the NK party challenge the decision of the IEC at the Electoral Court? Furthermore, should the court rule in his favor, what would be the implications of such a decision concerning the verdict issued by the Constitutional Court against him in 2021? The second question that I have is, amidst pervasive misinformation, how can efforts be directed towards addressing concerns or controversies that surround the IEC's decision, while concurrently bolstering public understanding of electoral processes and the rule of law? And in addition to this, how can media, which is supposed to be the fourth arm of government, responsibly report on IEC decision and its implications while mitigating the spread of misinformation or biased narratives?
All right, Mosabetsi, thank you very much indeed. We will get some answers for you in a short while. Let's go to Mbasa. Mbasa, let's hear from you.
Okay, thank you, Blaine. Good evening to yourself and the viewers at home. Well, I have two comments or questions. One is to first acknowledge that the former President Jacob Zuma commands quite a wide support. He has political clout, he's very influential, and he has quite a huge following in the country. And this ruling by the IEC in one way or the other, it does work to the benefit of the governing party, because when we look at the MK party's performance in the by-elections this year, we can see that it was clearly eating the lunch of the ANC and the EFF as well within KZN. However, I want to bring our attention to the accident that happened on the 28th of March that was involving the former President Jacob Zuma, and how that accident that happened the day before the Easter weekend was used by the spokesperson of the party to create this narrative that this kind of conspiracy theory that the president is a target by the ANC of Ramaphosa, a target of a white monopoly capital, and that there's a hit out on his life, and Begitele and Begimtolo have something to do with that. Now, I just want to ask Prof. Zulu and Jolene about what is the danger of this kind of narrative as we head towards the elections on the 29th of May.
All right. I know Professor Mgomezulu has to leave in about 5 minutes' time, so I want to get your take on this, Prof, and then we'll go to Jolene. Prof, to you first.
Thank you very much, Blaine, and thank you very much for the question, Mr.
Go on, Prof.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I don't know what went wrong on my side. I was saying thank you very much for the question. If we start with the last question on the accident, in fact, we have to do everything possible to make sure that we address this accident as speedily as possible. The reason is very simple. A strategy like this has been used in other countries. I was in Kenya in 2002 when the same strategy was used against Mwai Kibaki, who became the president. Can you still hear me, Blake?
Yes, go on. Loud and clear.
Yeah, I was there in Kenya. So just before the conclusion of the campaign period, there was a fluke accident where a truck just went straight to the convoy and then was sent to the ditch. And in his inauguration, which I attended at Uhuru Park, he had to be flown in from the UK with the plasters all over the body, and he was shown sitting simply because there was an attempt to eliminate him. So given that context, then we cannot simply rule it out in our context, even though it has never happened before. There is always first time. So the first thing that needs to happen then is that everything must be done to investigate this case properly, not to do like what we did with the Senzo Mewa case, when we just keep moving around the case instead of addressing the case directly. So that is how I can respond to that. I can only share the view that JZ, in fact, has a political clout, as my brother has been saying. That is absolutely true, factually correct. No one can dispute that. Even those who do so, they do that for their own political ends. Otherwise, the reality points to the opposite direction. Then the last one, with regards to Letitia, when she makes the point that the crime has been committed, let's hypothetically say that yes, a crime was committed. Now, which section did we use to pass the judgment? Because if I remember well, the act that was passed in 1947 is clear. If we're in contempt of a summons, you are fined in two ways. One, you are either fined £50 or you are sentenced to a maximum of 6 months. I don't know then how this judgment came to 15 months. And then, of course, at one point it was 2 years. So it means this the number of months was thumbsucked. It was not premised in law. Maybe Mr. Kapasha, Mr. Kolo will have a different opinion. But as far as I'm concerned, the 15 months was thumbsucked. It was not based in law. And then as to how the MK should rule, should work on this matter, and should the court rule in the MK's favor, what would that mean? One, it would mean that they will have looked at the arguments presented by the MK lawyers. If they find those arguments convincing, which we don't know at the moment what those arguments will be, given the point that Mr. Klabashi just said that we've run out of time. But then it will depend. Then if they rule in his favor or in MK's favor, then it's fine, well and good. Then we'll avoid all the other things we've been talking about.
Prof, I know you have to leave. We really appreciate your thoughts on this matter. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Blaine, and thank you very much to my colleagues, and thank you to the viewers.